The morning sun barely touched the grand windows of the palace when Camilla quietly opened her bedroom door. She had been awake since 4 in the morning, her heart racing with a mixture of fear and determination. Today was the day she would finally leave this golden prison that had become her life. For months, she had been planning this moment. The constant scrutiny, the endless protocols, and the suffocating expectations had slowly drained the life from her spirit. What had once seemed like a fairy tale had turned into a nightmare of cameras, criticism, and carefully choreographed appearances. She missed her old life, her freedom, and most importantly, her ability to make her own choices. Camilla moved through her private quarters like a ghost, careful not to wake the staff who lived in the nearby rooms. She had learned every creaking floorboard, every squeaky door hinge during her time here. The palace that housed hundreds of people somehow felt like the loneliest place on earth. She pulled out a small suitcase from beneath her bed, one she had hidden weeks ago behind winter coats that were rarely used. Inside, she had been secretly collecting items that meant something to her. A photograph of her family from before she married into royalty, a simple gold bracelet her grandmother had given her, and letters from friends who had slowly distanced themselves as her life became more public. The weight of her decision pressed heavily on her shoulders. She knew that leaving would create a scandal that would echo through the media for years. But staying felt like slowly disappearing, becoming nothing more than a carefully polished statue in the palace's collection of royal artifacts. As she packed her few personal belongings, memories flooded back to her wedding day. She remembered feeling so hopeful, so ready to embrace this new life of service and purpose. The crowds had cheered, the bells had rung, and she had genuinely believed she could make a difference. But the reality had been far different from the dream. Every day brought new rules, new restrictions, and new ways her natural personality had to be hidden or modified. She could not speak her mind freely, could not choose her own clothes without approval, and could not even decide what to eat for breakfast without it being planned by someone else. The simplest human freedoms had been stripped away, replaced by duty and obligation. Her hands trembled as she folded a simple blue dress, one of the few items in her wardrobe that she had actually chosen herself. It reminded her of the person she used to be, before titles and protocol had consumed her identity. She missed laughing without worrying if it was too loud, walking without measuring each step, and speaking without calculating how every word would be interpreted by the press. The palace guards changed shifts at 6:30 in the morning, something she had noticed during her early morning walks when sleep eluded her. This would give her a brief window when the security would be focused on the handover, rather than monitoring the internal movements of the family. She had timed everything perfectly. Camilla wrote a short letter explaining her decision, knowing it would eventually find its way to the right people. She tried to express that this was not about anger or resentment, but about survival. She needed to find herself again before she completely disappeared into the role that had been created for her. The corridor outside her room was dimly lit, with only the emergency lighting providing a soft glow. She knew that security cameras were everywhere, but she also knew their patterns and blind spots from months of observation. Her years in the palace had taught her to be invisible when she needed to be. She made her way toward the service entrance, a route she had discovered during one of her restless nights of wandering the palace halls. It was used primarily by staff and deliveries, and would be much less monitored than the main entrances. Her heart pounded so loudly she was certain someone would hear it echoing through the marble halls. The kitchen staff would not arrive for another hour, giving her just enough time to reach the exit without being seen. She had even prepared a story about wanting fresh air if anyone questioned her presence in that area of the palace. After all, her early morning habits were well known among the staff. As she approached the final corridor before the service entrance, she allowed herself to imagine what freedom would feel like. She pictured herself in a small apartment somewhere quiet, where she could wake up naturally, choose her own clothes, and perhaps even get a simple job where no one knew her face. The thought brought the first genuine smile to her face in months. But just as she rounded the corner toward the exit, her heart sank. Standing directly in front of the service door was a palace guard she had never seen before. He was tall, stern-looking, and clearly alert despite the early hour. This was not part of her carefully planned escape route. The guard noticed her immediately, his trained eyes taking in her casual clothes and the small suitcase in her hand. His expression shifted from neutral attention to obvious concern, as he realized who she was and what she might be attempting to do. Camilla froze, knowing that her moment of freedom was slipping away before it had even truly begun. All her careful planning, all her hope for a different life, now hung in the balance as she faced this unexpected obstacle. The guard stepped forward, his duty clear, and she realized that leaving the palace would not be as simple as she had hoped. The two stood facing each other in the quiet corridor, the weight of the moment heavy between them. Her carefully planned escape had just become much more complicated, and she wondered if she would ever get another chance to reclaim the life she had lost when she became part of the royal family. The guard studied Camilla's face carefully, recognizing the desperation in her eyes despite her attempt to appear calm. His name was Officer Mitchell, and he had been working palace security for over 15 years. He had seen many things during his time here, but never a member of the royal family trying to leave with a suitcase at dawn. "Your Highness," he said quietly, his voice respectful but firm, "is everything all right? It's quite early for you to be in this part of the palace." Camilla's mind raced as she tried to think of a believable explanation. She had rehearsed several stories for different situations, but facing this moment in reality felt completely different from her imagination. The weight of her suitcase seemed to grow heavier with each passing second. "I was just taking a walk," she said, attempting to sound casual. "I've been having trouble sleeping lately, and the doctor suggested early morning exercise might help." Officer Mitchell's eyes moved to the suitcase in her hand, then back to her face. His years of training had taught him to notice details, and the expensive luggage filled with personal items was not something someone typically carried during a casual walk. He also noticed she was wearing street clothes rather than the exercise attire that would be appropriate for a morning walk. "I see," he replied diplomatically. "And the suitcase, Your Highness?" Camilla felt her carefully constructed story beginning to crumble. She had underestimated how observant the palace security would be, even during shift changes. Her desperation began to show as she struggled to maintain her composure. "I was organizing some old items," she said, her voice slightly shaking. "I thought I might donate them to charity. I was going to put them in my car to take to the donation center later today." The guard nodded politely, but his expression made it clear he was not convinced by her explanation. He had been trained to handle delicate situations involving the royal family, and he knew that confronting a member directly could create complications far beyond his authority level. "Your Highness, perhaps it would be better if we return to your quarters," he suggested gently. "I can arrange for proper assistance with any donations you wish to make. There are established protocols for such activities that would be much safer and more appropriate." Camilla realized that her escape attempt was rapidly falling apart. The guard was being respectful and professional, but he was clearly not going to allow her to leave through this exit. Her carefully planned route to freedom was blocked, and she was not sure she would get another opportunity like this. "Please," she said, her voice becoming more emotional. "I just need some fresh air. I've been feeling so trapped lately, and I thought a short walk outside the palace grounds might help clear my head." Officer Mitchell could hear the genuine distress in her voice, and it made his job more difficult. He was trained to protect the royal family, which sometimes meant protecting them from their own impulsive decisions. He had seen the media coverage of her struggles to adapt to royal life, and he genuinely felt sympathy for her situation. However, he also knew that allowing a member of the royal family to leave the palace grounds without proper security arrangements could result in serious consequences. If something happened to her while she was outside, he would be held responsible. His duty was clear, even if it meant causing her additional emotional distress. "Your Highness, I understand that palace life can be challenging," he said kindly, "but my responsibility is to ensure your safety. If you need to leave the palace grounds, we can arrange proper security escorts and transportation. It would just take a few phone calls to organize everything appropriately." Camilla knew that involving official channels would mean the end of any hope for a private escape. Once the palace administration became involved, her movements would be monitored even more closely than usual. They would want to know why she felt the need to leave, where she planned to go, and how long she intended to be away. "You don't understand," she said, her composure finally beginning to break. "I don't want security escorts or official transportation. I just want to be a normal person for a few hours. I want to walk down a street without photographers following me, or sit in a cafe without people staring and whispering." The pain in her voice was evident, and Officer Mitchell found himself in an incredibly difficult position. His training told him to follow protocol, but his human instincts made him want to help this clearly struggling young woman. He could see that she was not trying to cause trouble or create a scandal, but was simply desperate for some relief from the pressures of her position. "Your Highness," he said carefully, "I can see that you're going through a difficult time, but leaving the palace this way could put you in danger, and it could also create problems that would make your situation even more challenging." Camilla looked at him with tears beginning to form in her eyes. She realized that this kind guard was just doing his job, but his job was exactly what was keeping her trapped in a life that was slowly destroying her spirit. The irony was not lost on her that the people assigned to protect her were the same people preventing her from saving herself. "What if I promised to stay nearby?" she asked desperately. "What if I just walked around the palace gardens for a while? I won't leave the grounds, I won't talk to anyone, and I'll come back within an hour." Officer Mitchell considered her request carefully. The palace gardens were technically still within the secure perimeter, and there were other guards positioned throughout the area. It might be possible to allow her this small freedom while still maintaining security protocols. But as he looked at the suitcase in her hand, he realized that her request for a simple walk in the gardens was not her real intention. The luggage suggested a much more permanent departure than a brief morning stroll. His duty required him to investigate further, regardless of how much he sympathized with her situation. Officer Mitchell stepped closer to Camilla, his expression becoming more serious as his duty took precedence over his sympathy. He could no longer ignore the obvious signs that this was not simply a morning walk or a charitable donation trip. The suitcase, her nervous behavior, and her desperate attempts to convince him to let her pass all pointed to something much more significant. "Your Highness, I'm going to need to see what's in the suitcase," he said firmly but respectfully. "Given the circumstances, it's my responsibility to ensure that nothing inappropriate is leaving the palace grounds." Camilla's heart sank as she realized there was no way to avoid this moment. All her careful planning and secret preparations were about to be exposed. She knew that once the contents of her suitcase were revealed, any chance of maintaining her cover story would disappear completely. "Please," she whispered, clutching the handle of the suitcase tighter. "You don't understand what this means to me. I'm not trying to steal anything or cause harm. I just need to leave." The desperation in her voice was heartbreaking, but Officer Mitchell had been in situations like this before where his personal feelings conflicted with his professional duties. He had learned that following protocol was usually the safest course of action, both for himself and for the people he was protecting. "I understand this is difficult, Your Highness," he said gently, "but I cannot allow anyone, regardless of their position, to leave the palace with unexamined luggage. It's a security requirement that applies to everyone." With trembling hands, Camilla slowly placed the suitcase on the marble floor. She knew that opening it would reveal not just her personal belongings, but also her deepest desire to escape the life that had become unbearable. Each item inside represented a piece of her true self that she had been trying to preserve. Officer Mitchell opened the suitcase carefully, his trained eyes immediately cataloging the contents. He saw the photographs, the personal letters, the simple clothing, and the few pieces of jewelry that clearly held sentimental rather than monetary value. What struck him most was how modest and personal everything was. These were not the belongings of someone planning a luxurious escape or attempting to profit from their royal position. These were the treasured possessions of someone who wanted to disappear quietly and start a simple, anonymous life somewhere else. The realization made his job even more difficult. "These appear to be personal items," he said carefully, examining the photographs of what he assumed was her family from before her marriage. "Can you explain why you were planning to take them out of the palace?" Camilla wiped away a tear that had escaped despite her efforts to remain composed. The moment she had been dreading had arrived, and she knew that honesty was her only remaining option. Lying would only make the situation worse and might result in even greater restrictions on her freedom. "Because they're all I have left of who I used to be," she said quietly. "Everything else in my life belongs to the palace, to the royal family, to the public. These few things are the only items that are truly mine." Officer Mitchell looked at the young woman before him and saw not a privileged royal, but a person who had lost herself in the expectations and demands of her position. The items in the suitcase told a story of someone desperately trying to hold on to their identity, while being slowly consumed by their role. "Your Highness," he said softly, "are you planning to leave permanently?" The question hung in the air between them, and Camilla knew that her answer would determine what happened next. If she admitted her true intentions, the guard would be obligated to report her plans to his superiors. If she lied, she would be betraying the only honest conversation she had had in months. "I don't know," she answered truthfully. "I just know that I can't continue living the way I have been. I feel like I'm disappearing a little more each day. I thought that if I could just get away for a while, maybe I could figure out how to be myself again." Officer Mitchell had never been in a situation quite like this one. His training had prepared him for many scenarios, but not for a member of the royal family having what appeared to be a genuine emotional crisis. He could see that she was not acting out of anger or rebellion, but out of deep pain and desperation. "Your Highness, leaving this way would create enormous problems," he said carefully. "The media attention alone would be overwhelming. Have you considered speaking with someone about how you're feeling? Perhaps there are other solutions that wouldn't require such drastic action." Camilla laughed bitterly at his suggestion. The idea that she could simply talk to someone about her problems showed how little people understood about her situation. Every conversation she had was monitored, every emotion analyzed, and every concern filtered through layers of palace protocol. "Who would I talk to?" she asked. "Everyone around me works for the palace. Their job is to make sure I fulfill my duties and maintain the proper image. No one's job is to care about whether I'm happy or even whether I survive this emotionally." The raw honesty of her words struck Officer Mitchell deeply. He had always assumed that members of the royal family lived privileged lives with access to the best of everything, including emotional support. He was beginning to understand that wealth and status could not protect someone from feeling completely alone. "There must be someone," he said hopefully, "family members, friends, or professional counselors who could help you work through these feelings without requiring you to abandon your entire life." Camilla shook her head sadly. Her family had become distant since her marriage, partly because they felt intimidated by her new status, and partly because they genuinely did not understand the pressures she faced. Her old friends had gradually stopped calling, and making new friends was nearly impossible when every relationship had to be scrutinized for security and political implications. "You still don't understand," she said. "This isn't just about feeling sad or stressed. This is about losing my entire sense of self. I look in the mirror and I don't recognize the person staring back at me. I speak words that aren't my own, wear clothes chosen by someone else, and smile when I want to cry." Officer Mitchell realized that he was dealing with something far more serious than a simple escape attempt. This was a person experiencing a genuine crisis of identity and purpose. However, his responsibility remained clear, regardless of how much he sympathized with her situation. Officer Mitchell closed the suitcase gently and stood up, his face showing the internal conflict he was experiencing. He had been moved by Camilla's honest explanation, but he also knew that allowing her to leave would likely end his career and could potentially put her in danger. The weight of his decision felt enormous. "Your Highness, I cannot let you leave the palace this way," he said finally, "but I also cannot ignore what you've shared with me. What you're describing sounds like something that needs immediate attention from people who are qualified to help." Camilla felt a mixture of disappointment and relief at his words. Part of her had hoped he might understand and let her go, but another part was exhausted from carrying this burden alone. Having someone finally acknowledge that her situation was serious felt like a small victory, even if it meant her escape plan had failed. "What happens now?" she asked quietly. "Will you report this to your supervisors? Will I be watched even more closely than before?" Officer Mitchell considered his options carefully. He could follow standard protocol and immediately report the incident to his chain of command, which would likely result in increased security measures and probably some form of intervention that might not be in her best interests. Alternatively, he could try to handle the situation more discreetly. "Your Highness, may I suggest something?" he asked. "Instead of me reporting this through official channels immediately, what if you spoke to someone yourself? Someone you trust or someone in a position to actually help you address these feelings?" Camilla looked at him with surprise. She had expected him to immediately contact his supervisors and turn her escape attempt into an official incident. His suggestion that she take control of getting help herself was unexpected and showed a level of understanding she had not anticipated. "I appreciate your kindness," she said, "but I've already tried speaking to people. The palace staff are all concerned about their jobs and the institution's reputation. My family doesn't understand the pressures I face, and requesting professional help would require going through so many official channels that it would become public knowledge." Officer Mitchell nodded, understanding her dilemma better now. The very systems designed to protect and serve the royal family could also become barriers to getting genuine help when it was needed. The complexity of her situation was becoming clearer to him. What if there was a way to get help without it becoming a public matter? He asked thoughtfully. Someone discreet? Someone who could provide support without creating official records or media attention? Camilla looked at him with a glimmer of hope in her eyes. The idea that there might be a solution she had not considered gave her the first feeling of optimism she had experienced in weeks. Maybe her choice did not have to be between suffering in silence and running away completely. "Do you know someone like that?" she asked carefully. "Someone who could be trusted with this kind of situation?" Officer Mitchell thought about his years working in palace security. Over time, he had learned about various resources available to staff and family members for sensitive situations. There were people who specialized in helping individuals deal with the unique pressures of high-profile positions. There are professionals who work specifically with people in situations like yours, he explained. People who understand the unique challenges of public life and who are bound by very strict confidentiality agreements. They help individuals find ways to cope with pressure while still fulfilling their responsibilities. The possibility that she might be able to get help without having to choose between her mental health and her position was something Camilla had never considered. She had seen her options as either continuing to suffer or escaping completely. But perhaps there was a middle path. "Would you help me contact someone like that?" she asked hesitantly, without making this an official incident. Officer Mitchell realized he was making a decision that went beyond his normal duties, but his instincts told him it was the right thing to do. Sometimes helping someone meant taking calculated risks, and he felt that this young woman deserved a chance to get proper support. "I can make some discreet inquiries," he said, "but in return, I need your word that you won't attempt to leave the palace again without proper arrangements. What you were planning to do today could have put you in serious danger." Camilla considered his proposal. Giving up her escape plan felt like surrendering her only hope for freedom, but the alternative he was offering might provide a way to address her problems without destroying her entire life. It was a compromise, but perhaps a wise one. "If you can truly help me find someone who can help with this situation," she said, "then I promise I won't try to leave this way again. But I need to know that something will actually change. I can't continue living the way I have been." Officer Mitchell extended his hand to seal their agreement. "I give you my word that I will do everything in my power to help you find appropriate support. This conversation will remain between us unless you decide otherwise." As they shook hands, Camilla felt a strange sense of relief. Her escape attempt had failed, but she had finally found someone who listened to her concerns and took them seriously. For the first time in months, she felt like she was not completely alone in dealing with her situation. "What should I do with these things?" she asked, gesturing toward the suitcase. "Keep them safe," Officer Mitchell replied. "They clearly mean a great deal to you, and you should not have to give up the items that connect you to who you are. Perhaps part of the solution will be finding ways to honor both your responsibilities and your personal identity." Camilla picked up her suitcase, which now felt lighter somehow. The items inside were still important to her, but they no longer represented her only connection to freedom. Instead, they might become part of a larger solution that would allow her to reclaim herself without abandoning everything else. "Thank you," she said sincerely. "I know you could have handled this very differently, and I'm grateful for your understanding." Officer Mitchell nodded respectfully. "Everyone deserves to feel like themselves, Your Highness. We just need to find a way to make that possible within your current circumstances." 3 days later, Camilla received a discreet message that a meeting had been arranged for her. Officer Mitchell had kept his promise and contacted a professional counselor who specialized in working with individuals in high-pressure, public positions. The meeting would take place in a private office within the palace grounds, ensuring complete confidentiality. Dr. Sarah Williams arrived at the palace that afternoon, carrying credentials that impressed even the most senior staff members. She had worked with diplomats, politicians, and other public figures who struggled with the demands of their positions. Her reputation for discretion and effectiveness had made her the go-to professional for sensitive situations. Camilla met Dr. Williams in a small sitting room that was rarely used by the family. The space felt more intimate and less formal than the grand rooms where she usually received visitors. For the first time in months, she was able to sit in a comfortable chair and speak to someone whose only job was to listen and help. "Your Highness, I understand you've been going through a difficult time," Dr. Williams began gently. "I want you to know that everything we discuss here is completely confidential. My role is to help you find strategies for managing the challenges you're facing." Camilla felt nervous about opening up to yet another person, but something about Dr. Williams' manner put her at ease. The counselor did not seem intimidated by her royal status, nor did she appear to be treating this as anything other than a professional consultation with someone who needed help. "I don't even know where to begin," Camilla admitted. "I feel like I've lost myself completely since joining the royal family. Every day feels like I'm playing a role that doesn't fit who I really am." Dr. Williams nodded understandingly. "That's actually a very common experience for people who enter high-profile positions, especially when those positions require significant changes to their personal lives. The feeling of losing your authentic self is something we can work on together." Over the next hour, Camilla found herself sharing thoughts and feelings she had kept buried for months. She talked about the loneliness, the constant scrutiny, the pressure to be perfect, and the way her own opinions and preferences had gradually been erased by the demands of her role. Dr. Williams listened carefully, occasionally asking questions that helped Camilla explore her feelings more deeply. The counselor did not try to minimize her concerns or suggest that she should simply accept her situation. Instead, she validated Camilla's experiences and helped her understand that her reactions were normal given the circumstances. "What you're describing is a form of identity conflict," Dr. Williams explained. "When someone's external circumstances change dramatically, especially in ways that restrict their personal autonomy, it can create significant psychological stress. The good news is that there are strategies we can use to help you maintain your sense of self while still fulfilling your responsibilities." For the first time in months, Camilla felt hopeful. The idea that she could find a way to be herself while still being a member of the royal family had seemed impossible, but Dr. Williams spoke about it as though it were an achievable goal. "What would that look like practically?" Camilla asked. "How can I maintain my identity when every aspect of my life is controlled by protocol and public expectations?" Dr. Williams smiled. "We'll work on identifying the core elements of your personality and values that are most important to you. Then we'll find ways to express those elements within the constraints of your position. It's about finding authentic moments and choices within a structured environment." They began by discussing Camilla's interests and passions from before her marriage. She had always loved literature and had dreamed of teaching children to read. She enjoyed gardening and found peace in working with her hands. She valued directness and honesty in her relationships and disliked pretense. "These interests and values don't have to disappear," Dr. Williams pointed out. "We can find ways to incorporate them into your royal duties. Perhaps you could champion literacy programs or support educational initiatives. Your love of gardening could translate into environmental causes or community garden projects." Camilla began to see possibilities she had not considered before. Instead of viewing her royal position as a prison that prevented her from being herself, she could potentially use it as a platform to express the things she cared about most. The key was finding the right approach. "What about the constant public attention?" Camilla asked. "How do I handle knowing that everything I do is being watched and judged?" Dr. Williams had extensive experience helping people cope with public scrutiny. "We'll work on developing emotional boundaries that allow you to maintain your privacy internally, even when your actions are public. You can learn to distinguish between your public role and your private self." They spent considerable time discussing strategies for managing the stress of constant observation. Dr. Williams taught Camilla breathing techniques, mindfulness exercises, and ways to create mental space for herself even during public appearances. "The goal is not to eliminate all stress or to make this easy," Dr. Williams clarified. "The goal is to help you develop the tools and perspectives you need to thrive in this situation, while staying true to who you are." As their session continued, Camilla felt a weight lifting from her shoulders. For the first time since her marriage, someone was helping her see her situation as manageable rather than hopeless. The problems had not disappeared, but they no longer seemed insurmountable. "I want to schedule regular sessions with you," Camilla said. "I think I'm going to need ongoing support as I work through these changes." Dr. Williams agreed readily. "That's exactly what I would recommend. Change takes time, and having consistent support will be crucial as you develop new strategies for managing your role." They arranged for weekly meetings, with the understanding that additional sessions could be scheduled if needed. Dr. Williams also provided Camilla with some books and resources that would help her continue working on these issues between their meetings. As Dr. Williams prepared to leave, she turned to Camilla with a final thought. "Remember, seeking help when you need it is not a sign of weakness. It's a sign of wisdom and self-awareness. You've taken an important step today toward creating a life that works for you." Camilla walked Dr. Williams to the door, feeling more optimistic than she had in months. The desperate desire to escape that had driven her to pack a suitcase and attempt to leave the palace had been replaced by a sense that she could find ways to thrive within her current circumstances. That evening, as she prepared for bed, Camilla opened the suitcase she had packed for her escape attempt. Instead of symbols of a life she was trying to flee, the items now felt like reminders of who she was and what she valued. She carefully unpacked them and placed them around her room, no longer hiding the things that connected her to her authentic self. 6 months later, Camilla stood in the garden of a community center in one of the city's neighborhoods, surrounded by children who were excitedly showing her the vegetables they had grown. Her hands were dirty from helping them harvest tomatoes, and her dress had a small grass stain from sitting on the ground to listen to their stories. She had never felt more like herself. The literacy and gardening program she had developed had become one of her most successful royal initiatives. Working with Dr. Williams, she had found a way to combine her love of education and gardening with her royal duties. The program taught children to read while also showing them how to grow their own food, addressing both educational and nutritional needs in underserved communities. "Your Highness, look how big this pumpkin grew," called out 8-year-old Emma, pointing to an enormous orange squash that had somehow flourished despite the children's enthusiastic but sometimes misguided care. Camilla laughed genuinely, the sound carrying across the garden and making several of the children giggle in response. "That's incredible, Emma. You've done such wonderful work taking care of it. What story are you going to write about your pumpkin adventure?" The integration of literacy with gardening had been Camilla's idea, inspired by her sessions with Dr. Williams, where they had explored ways to authentically express her interests within her royal role. Children kept journals about their plants, wrote stories inspired by what they grew, and even performed little plays about vegetables and fruits. Officer Mitchell, who had been assigned as part of her security detail for this event, watched from a distance with satisfaction. The young woman he had encountered that desperate morning 6 months ago trying to escape the palace was barely recognizable in the confident, joyful person he saw today. She had found a way to be genuinely herself while fulfilling her royal duties. The transformation had not been immediate or easy. Camilla had continued her weekly sessions with Dr. Williams, working through the deep feelings of isolation and identity loss that had nearly driven her to abandon her position entirely. There had been difficult days when the old feelings of desperation returned, but she now had tools and support to manage them. "Can you read us the story you wrote about your garden, Your Highness?" asked 10-year-old Marcus, holding up a small notebook filled with his careful handwriting. Camilla sat down on a wooden bench, and the children gathered around her in a semicircle. This had become one of her favorite parts of these visits. The children treated her with respect but without the formal distance that characterized most of her interactions. They were curious about her stories, honest about their own feelings, and completely uninterested in the royal protocols that usually governed her conversations. "Once upon a time," she began, reading from Marcus's notebook, "there was a lonely seed that was planted in rich soil, but felt like it might never grow because it was so different from all the other plants in the garden." As she read the story aloud, Camilla realized that Marcus had unknowingly written about her own journey over the past months. The seed in his story eventually learned that being different was not a problem to be solved, but a unique contribution to be celebrated. By the end of the tale, the unusual plant had become the most beautiful and helpful one in the entire garden. "That's a wonderful story, Marcus," she said, closing the notebook. Sometimes being different feels scary, but it can also be the thing that makes us most valuable to the people around us. The children nodded solemnly, understanding the lesson in the way that children often grasp important truths more quickly than adults. They had no idea that their simple stories and honest reactions had played a role in helping their visitor rediscover her own sense of purpose and identity. Dr. Williams had helped Camilla understand that authenticity was not about having complete freedom to do whatever she wanted, but about finding genuine ways to express her values and interests within her existing circumstances. The royal position that had once felt like a prison had become a platform for making a real difference in areas she cared deeply about. As the afternoon drew to a close, Camilla helped the children clean up their gardening tools and gather the vegetables they would take home to their families. Several of the parents had arrived to pick up their children, and they thanked her warmly for creating such a meaningful program. "Your Highness," said Mrs. Rodriguez, Marcus's mother, "this program has changed my son's attitude toward school completely. He comes home excited about reading and asks to help me cook with the vegetables he grows here. You've given him something wonderful." These conversations with parents had become some of the most rewarding aspects of Camilla's royal duties. She was making a tangible difference in people's lives while doing work that genuinely energized and fulfilled her. The desperate emptiness she had felt months earlier had been replaced by a sense of purpose and connection. As her car pulled away from the community center, Camilla reflected on how dramatically her life had changed since that morning, when Officer Mitchell had stopped her escape attempt. She still lived in the palace, still had official duties and public appearances, and still dealt with media attention and protocol requirements. But she had learned to navigate these challenges while maintaining her sense of self. Her regular sessions with Dr. Williams continued, providing ongoing support as she faced new situations and grew more confident in her ability to be authentic within her role. She had also developed friendships with some of the staff members and had rekindled relationships with family members, who now better understood the pressures she faced. The suitcase that had once contained her escape plan now held books, gardening gloves, and small gifts from the children in her programs. Instead of representing a desire to flee her life, it had become a symbol of her commitment to bringing her authentic self to her work. That evening, as she prepared for a formal dinner with foreign dignitaries, Camilla put on the required elegant gown and jewelry. But she also wore the simple bracelet her grandmother had given her, one of the items from her escape suitcase that now served as a daily reminder of who she was beneath all the royal trappings. She looked in the mirror and saw not a trapped woman playing a role, but someone who had learned to honor both her responsibilities and her authentic self. The journey had been difficult, but it had led her to a place where she could genuinely smile during public appearances because she knew that her work was making a real difference in the world. Officer Mitchell had been right when he suggested that leaving the palace in desperation would have created more problems than it solved. Instead, staying and getting proper help had allowed her to transform her situation from the inside out, creating a life that was both meaningful and sustainable. The woman who had once felt like she was disappearing had instead learned to shine more brightly than ever before.